Welcome to the channel. It's brew day. We're going to brew beer today, and it sincerely is a lot of fun. I've done it several times. It's come out well, I think, every time, and it's kind of a cool process. The whole fermentation and everything is really neat. So I got a kit from a store in Long Beach, and it's called Stein Fillers, and they give you in this kit the grains, the hops, and the malt extract. Thank you. My camera woman is helping me out. So that's the basic kit, and depending on what kind of beer you're going to make, you're going to get different types of hops, and also you have to have yeast, and the yeast is in the refrigerator right now. But this beer is, well, what it's called is steam beer. So it's kind of a take on Anchor Steam, which is a beer that's made in San Francisco. And it's not a crazy hoppy beer, it's not an IPA, but it does have a little body to it. And I like it. I drink Anchor Steam. It's a good beer. And when I first started doing this process, my wife gave me a kit for Christmas, and with it came a book that I have, I wouldn't say I read the whole book, but I've read a lot of it. And looked at a lot of YouTube videos too when I made it the first time. And I guess I've been making beer now a couple of years, and have made a few different batches, and I've used different kinds of kits to make different kinds of beer each time. So let's get started. The first thing to do is we're going to fire up the pot over here. To make 5 gallons of beer, you basically need about 5.5 gallons because some of it is going to evaporate during the boil. You can use tap water and save the money. I like Arrowhead water. It's my favorite water, and I think, well, you know, beer's mainly water. Might as well use the best water, at least in terms of what I like, in the brew. So I'm going to add, each one of these is 2.5 gallons. This is a gallon. I won't add this whole thing. Now this is an 8-gallon pot, and you can make beer without having a big pot like this. And you can make it without having a propane tank and this burner as well. And if you get a kit from one of these places like I did, they'll explain to you how to use a couple of different pots to get through the process without having a particular, particularly big pot. Okay, so we're putting the last of the water in, so we should have 5.5, maybe a little bit more than 5.5 gallons in here. And, in terms of how much you lose in evaporation, depends on how much you have the lid off the pot when the beer is boiling. And the first time I made it, I basically boiled the wort with the lid off the whole time, and I did go through 1 gallon that initial time. So we need to get this to 155 degrees, and then we will seep the grains for 30 minutes inside the pot. So right now I'm going to get the grain in the, I think it's pronounced muslin, M-U-S-L-I-N bag. And I'm going to do that inside just so it kind of can make a little bit of a mess. And that way it'll go in the sink. So you tie, one end already has the knot in it, or it's closed on one end, and the other end should be open. You can see in the sink the finer particles of the grains are coming out of the bag. And at the end of the brew, what they call the wort, which is what we're brewing today, the wort, there will be trub on the bottom of the pot after we boiled it, and there'll be a layer of it. Just going to tie that into a knot, and then when the water out there is 155 degrees, we'll tie this onto the handle and let it sit in there and seep for 30 minutes. We found some Anchor Steam. My camera woman made me do it. Okay, so we're right at 155 Fahrenheit, and I turn the heat down a little bit because I don't want it to get too hot either. What are we at there?
Looks like 150.
150?
Yep.
Okay. And it's going to continue to heat up. Like I said, I turned it. Hey, by the way, please subscribe. Just click on the subscribe button and the bell icon to receive a notification every time a new episode comes out. I'm going to tie that off. And we'll kind of put the lid on it loosely and then just see what kind of adjustments we need to make to the propane to kind of keep it close to 155 degrees. So after it has the grains have seeped for 30 minutes, warm this up, the malt extract, and we'll pour that in and we'll add 1 ounce of the hops. We've got 2 ounces of the hops. You add 1 ounce initially and you add the other ounce in increments later on. So that's the next part of the process. So we just have to have this seep for 30 minutes and we'll go on to the next step. Probably the single most important thing when brewing is sanitation. If there are airborne yeast that get into your beer or other kinds of germs that get into your beer, it is what they call, it gives it an off taste. And you have to be really fastidious about sanitizing everything that you use. Now, this is the bucket that the beer is going to go into after we cook it today. After we cook the wort, it will go in here. Right now, I have a gallon of water in here, and it's just tap water. Then I have Star San. It's a sanitizer. And you use 1 ounce to every 5 gallons. So we need 1/5 of an ounce, 0.2, and I know about what that looks like inside this cup. Maybe that's going to be 0.2. Okay, so I'm going to add the sanitizer to the bucket, and this sanitizer only has to be on the surface for like 30 seconds for it to sanitize. And I'm just going to kind of mix it up a little bit, and it'll get sudsy. Because ultimately you want to get the whole bucket sanitized. And I have to sanitize the spigot. So we'll run the sanitizer through the spigot. And when you're done sanitizing, you'll see kind of what it looks like. There'll still be foam in here, and they don't want you to rinse out the foam because then you're defeating the purpose of having the thing sanitized. They say that the excess foam will not cause any problems for the beer. It's not harmful and it won't change the taste of the beer. I try to get as much out of there as I possibly can, but it's clinging to the sides, so it's going to be sanitizing all that area. It'll be on there plenty long enough. So we have other things we have to sanitize too. This is called an airlock. Once we put the beer in the fermenter and we put the yeast in there, the yeast will start eating the sugar in the beer, and that will cause fermentation, but it will also cause CO2, and that CO2 has to escape somehow. If you had this completely tightly closed, it would blow the top off of it. So this is an airlock, and the way it works is that you put a liquid in here that creates a barrier between the beer but allows bubbles to come out and escape here. So the CO2 is able to escape, but at the same time it prevents germs from coming in because there's going to be a barrier. You can just put water in here. Some people put vodka in here. Some people put sanitizer in here. I've done all three, and I don't know what I'm going to do today, but this goes like this, goes inside this right here, and then it goes here. So I want this sanitized. I've washed everything, but I want it to be sanitized. So what I will do is, that's the reason to have a gallon in here, because I'm going to use it for different things. So I'm going to put my airlock in there. I think they call it a bung. I'm going to put it in. The cap. And scissors that I'm going to use later to open up the yeast need to be sanitized. Once the wort is finished cooking, I'm going to transfer the wort from the bucket, the pot, to this fermenter. And I've washed this hose, but before I do it, I'm going to hook this hose up to the fermenter that has the sanitation in it, the sanitizer in it, and run it through the hose. So I've sanitized the hose as well. You have to sanitize everything that the beer's going to come into contact with after it's cooled down. When the beer is boiling, you don't have to worry about germs or airborne yeast, because it's so hot it's going to kill it. But we're going to cool that beer down, and we're going to cool it down to 90 degrees, and that's when it becomes really susceptible to airborne yeast and other germs. While the grains are seeping, we're going to get the yeast out. And I got this yeast from the same place that I got the kit, and it's specifically for this type of lager. So they have a whole bunch of different yeasts, and they have them for specific beers. So they want this to be room temperature, so we'll take it out and leave it out. And when I open it, I'm going to use the scissors that have been sanitized so that we don't introduce any germs to the yeast. The malt's been sitting outside, so it's pretty loose actually, but I'll warm it up a little bit with just some warm water, just so it's easier to get it out of the bag. You can also just place it in a large bowl with hot water. But we've almost been steeping for 30 minutes, so we're going to add the malt, and then we're going to bring it to a boil, and then we're going to add the hops. Okay, so the grains have been steeping for 30 minutes. They don't want you to squeeze this bag, but they do want you to run some hot water over the bag to get a little bit of the grains out. Now the malt, and we're going to turn the flame off. Alright, so we have seeped our grains, we have put in our extract malt, and now we're going to, and the heat was off. When I turned the heat off when we put the malt in, now I'm going to turn it back on and bring it to a boil. So we're at a boil now, so the grains and the extract, the malt extract, are boiling, and they want you to have a really vigorous boil. So I'm going to add the hops, and sometimes that can cause like a boil up. Now I've got 2 ounces of hops here, and right now I'm only supposed to add 1 ounce, so half of it. So I'm going to try to separate that out, add the half. If you stir it,
might boil over.
and we didn't have a boil over. And sometimes when you watch video on YouTube of people brewing, and they do it in their kitchen, and they add those hops, you saw how it wanted to really foam up like that. They get a boil over in the kitchen and make a huge mess. So we're good. So we're going to boil it for 45 minutes. So it has been boiling for 30 minutes. I'm going to shot in there, Alyssa. Wow, look at that goodness right there. I wish you could smell it. I think it kind of smells good in a weird way, but you're not crazy about it, huh?
I'm not crazy about it, no.
I think it'd be like a cologne. It'd be really good. Like a hop cologne. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I've gotten used to it or something, but it doesn't smell bad to me. Okay, so I'm going to put in half of what I have left. There we go. And now we boil it for another 15 minutes. And then the last part of those hops, they go in after we turn the heat off. We'll just let that cook another 15 minutes. And then what we do is we try to cool this down to 90 degrees as fast as we can. And the faster we do it, the more of the trub just drops out. So instead of being suspended in the boil, it just all drops to the bottom the faster you cool it. We're kind of low-teching it, so we are doing it with bags of ice and hose. Okay, I almost forgot something. This is the Irish moss. It did not come as part of the kit, but it is something that you can add to try to get everything to drop out that's suspended so you have a clearer beer. And I really want a clear amber beer. So there's a couple of other things that you can use too. I think gelatin is one of them, but I used this the last time and it worked well. I did one time have a kind of a cloudy beer, but not the last time I made it. So just 1 teaspoon of Irish moss in the last 15 minutes of the boil. Marissa, do you want to have some of this nice yum
No, thank you.
hops on there? A little taste? No?
Nope.
Okay. Your loss. All right, so it has been 15 minutes since we put the last hops in and the Irish moss. So we're going to turn the heat off. Okay, the idea is to try to get it cooled off as quickly as possible. And some things I've read said the optimum time is to try to get it cooled off within 15 minutes. Now, like I said, this is kind of the crude way of doing it. You can buy a copper piping device that's made for this, and then you hook a hose up to it and you stick it in there, and that cools it down to the 90 degrees you want to get to. Okay, so it's been about 20 minutes. We don't have it down to 90 degrees yet, but I've never gotten it down to 90 degrees in 15 minutes. So that's always been a goal, but it's never happened. And so as soon as we get down to 90, we're going to hook a hose up to it, and then we're going to transfer it from this brew pot into a fermenting bucket that I showed you earlier. I've sanitized the bucket and everything in there, so everything is ready to go. We just got to get this baby down to 90 degrees, so stay tuned. All right, it's at 90 degrees. Took longer than I would like, but that's the way it's always been. So we're going to put it up here, and then we're going to bring the fermenter bucket out and the hose, hook the hose up to the brew bucket and transfer it, and then put the yeast in, and then we just wait. So how heavy is 5 gallons?
Do you need help?
I don't think so.
Oh, you got it. Easy.
What temp are we reading there?
Let's see. Oh, 90 on the dot.
And we'll get rid of this water. You can water the plants.
Yeah. A little ice bath.
Okay, so this is our water with the sanitizer in it. And I've already done this once, and I'm going to go ahead and do it again and run more sanitizer through the hose. And they say, when I say they say, the people that are the expert brewers, not to worry about that little bit of foam. It's not going to hurt you, and it's not going to hurt the brew. Now, I am putting a paper towel that is soaked in the hand sanitizer, or not hand sanitizer, the sanitizer, and putting it over the top just to keep anything from getting in there. So we've got the scissors in here for when we need to cut the yeast package. We've got the top of the fermenter, and we have the airlock. Okay, so we'll keep everything in there. I'm going to tilt this hose to try to get as much of the sanitizer out of it as I can. And I sanitize this side of the sink as well. Got my bubbler under my arms, down there on the bottom. Find out real soon.
Yeah.
So we want to get 5 gallons in there. We don't know how much evaporated, but there are some, I don't know if the notches are on both sides. Yeah, they are. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So right here. Hopefully we can get to that mark before it starts drawing too low in the bucket, where we end up getting trub.
Starting to change different color, kind
Yeah,
of.
getting the trub in there.
And we're pretty much there. Yeah.
This is a plastic fermenter versus a glass one. So it's kind of hard to carry because it wants to give. Okay, so now we are going to shake and activate the yeast. And I'm going to put the container in the sanitizer. And make sure I've got the scissors. Now we'll cut the yeast. Put the top on. Okay, and I think they call this a bung. And now I'm just going to put water in this. It has some sanitizer in it. In my experience, when you push it in, sometimes you lose some of that water. Now, cap on. Make sure that's really in good. When I bought this bubbler, big mouth bubbler, I think is what it's called, some reviews complained about this top being pushed up because it's not really a screw on top. It just has this plastic threads, but it doesn't screw on. So you just kind of push it on. Okay, so this weight, this is bat weight, I use to put on the top here. And that's just a little extra weight on the top of this thing.
That's perfect for it.
So now, what do? So this needs to sit and start fermenting. Within 24 hours, it should start bubbling. Mm-hmm. You can read in the books where they'll say it doesn't have to bubble. The lack of bubbling doesn't mean it's not fermenting. And that has been true for me before when I used a different kind of bucket and the seal was not good enough. So the CO2 was escaping in another area and it wasn't going through the airlock. But I could tell by other things chemically that were going on with the beer that it was fermenting. So they want this, for this particular beer, they want it to be between 60 and 65 degrees. That's not going to happen. Our house is not that cold. So it won't get any warmer than 75 degrees where it's going to be located in a closet. But it's going to be in a dark place. And I think it'll be happy there. It's not, and depending on the beer, you can have a different kit for a different type of beer, and it will say, 70 to 75 degrees, so it depends. So now all we have to do is put it away. Wow. 14 hours after we put the fermenting bucket away, it started bubbling, so the CO2 started escaping out of the airlock. And it's now been about 42 hours since we started the fermentation process. And you can see what they call, I think it's pronounced croissant. That's the foamy, kind of the creamy colored foam. And that would tell you fermentation is happening even if the airlock wasn't bubbling. If the CO2 was escaping out of the lid, but you still had this foam, you would know that you have fermentation in process. I put this light on it. I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but there is sediment moving up and down. There goes a piece there. Up and down, it's just constant movement inside this fermenter. And you can see at the very bottom trub that is building up. But it is constant motion inside there. So everything is looking a-okay for fermentation. And in 2 weeks, we'll be racking it to a separate different fermenter, and the process continues. All right, so this is the timeline from here. It's going to sit in there for 2 weeks. Then I'm going to transfer it. They call that racking. And I'm going to transfer it to another fermentation bucket, get out a lot of the sediment that's going to be at the bottom of this bucket. It's going to sit another 2 weeks in here. So then at a month's time from today's date, we're going to add the sugar and we're going to bottle it. And then after it's bottled, it needs to sit for 2 weeks to be carbonated. So 6 weeks total from the day we brew it, we'll have beer to drink. So thank you for joining me. Please subscribe and we'll see you next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.